Can't live without them now, right? It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning, Chief Master Sergeant Retired John Ryder. John retired after 29 years of service of Air Force service. He was the Chief Functional Manager for 3,000 Financial Management Airmen. I was one of those airmen. Over the years, John and we conquered some leadership challenges. I think we created a few leadership challenges. Yep. And then as we got older, we had to go back and fix all of those leadership challenges that we created. And so we had a good time. John currently now is a senior consultant for Kearney and Company. And over the years, I've had the pleasure to call John Sergeant Ryder. I've also called him Chief. Yep. Later began calling him John again because we were both chiefs. And now I have the pleasure of calling him my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to John Ryder, my friend.
Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Doing good today? Good, good. How many of you folks like corny jokes? See a lot of folks talking about corny jokes. Sorry, photographer, I'm a walker, right? I'm a walker, right? So the other day, I had to call the local police department. We won't get into why. Let's just say I had a call. Had to get some information. Had a nice little conversation with the desk sergeant. Now, the desk sergeant wasn't necessarily the friendliest person in the world. Obviously, a lot of people are calling the police department for various reasons. So I wanted to try to break the ice, right? So I broke the ice by asking the desk sergeant, hey, what does a cop say to his belly button? Anybody know? You're under a vest. No? 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 Okay, so this gentleman over here, so a cop's wearing a vest, right? So, okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure. So, thank you, Mr. Randall, for extending the invite. Lisa, thank you very much for the introduction. Lisa asked me to talk a little bit about leadership. Obviously, you know, as she was talking about my 29 years in the Air Force, yes, there was some opportunities to go ahead and display leadership. So I want to share with you a couple things that come to mind when I think about leadership, and probably the most important thing that comes to mind when I think about leadership is motivation. Right? You got to motivate your folks. You got to motivate them from day one. Get them going. Get them on the team. Any of you have chickens? Any of you have chickens? Right? Okay, good, good. So my wife grew up having chickens, right? So she wanted to have chickens. So a couple years ago, we built this chicken coop. Now, 2 or 3 months ago, we went to Tractor Supply. We bought 5 baby chicks. We're hoping all of them are going to be hens. Turns out one's a rooster, 4's a hen. That's okay. That's all right. So we're raising them in the garage until they get big enough for them to go outside. In the meantime, we swing by this restaurant called Bojangles. Right? Any of you eaten at Bojangles? Yeah, delicious chicken, man. It's like some of the best chicken in the world. But if you get like a big family meal at Bojangles, you get a big family meal. It comes in this gigantic box, and it's got a carrying case, right? So we get home, go ahead and open up, have the chicken. We put the box in the garage. The box is sitting in the garage for a couple days. The weather starts getting nice outside. My wife, Rhonda, goes, you know what, I want to let the chickens outside, so she puts a little fence out there, so that way they can eat some grass, get some bugs. What box do you think she grabs to go ahead and put the chickens in to carry them outside? Right? Now, that is a lesson to the chickens. Hey, right? The reason we bought you is to lay eggs. If you do not lay eggs, you may be inside a Bojangles box. I'm not recommending that when you bring on a new employee, you carry them around in the Bojangle box, but the purpose behind the story is to let you guys know one of the reasons we bring employees on is to let them know what they are part of and the reason they're there. Mr. Aguilera was here yesterday afternoon. He talked about the book Start With Why, right? And that's a book I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but that's one of the main functions of when you bring an employee on. They need to understand what they are part of, the organization that they belong to. Think about the organization of DHS. How many employees? About 240,000. What's your annual budget? He says his head's going up and down, so I'm like, good. All right, I got that right. right? About 22 agencies. Some people say maybe 23, maybe 21, whatever the case may be. $44 billion budget. You folks are all part of that organization. You folks are the people that go ahead and make sure the organization's running the way it's supposed to. You're providing the financial support to the people out there on the front lines doing the day-to-day jobs, right? Bring up a couple slides here. Right, the flight attendant who did drugs sends to time served. TSA, who here is supporting TSA? Any of you? Right, it was you that's providing the financial support to TSA to go ahead and take care of this. That's what you're part of. Do you realize that? You do? Okay, good. Right? ICE arrests 33 with history of human rights violations across the U.S. during Operation No Safe Haven 4. Got to get those Roman numerals right. Who's part of ICE? Right? Thank you for what you guys do. This is what you're part of. This is when you're doing your financial statements and all the financial audits that you're having to do every single day. This is the results of it. Because the folks on the ground, they need your support, they need your help, they need finance. They need budgeters, they need accountants to go ahead and make sure the job gets done. Coasties. What? Yeah, I like that. Any of you, any of you grew up watching wrestling? Who was the guy that would give you 2 claps and a hua? Any of you know? What's that? No, not Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Right? Ric Flair. Ric Flair. Woo! Right? So how about every time we give a shout out to the Coasties, we go, woo! Right? You guys go with that? All right, so let's try that, right? Let's go back one slide. Right? Back one slide. Okay, here's the Coast Guard. They go ahead and save somebody. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. You guys may get a chance later on. Right? But this is what the Coast Guard's providing. This is what part of DHS is all about. Go ahead and saving a 71-year-old man 23 miles east of Jupiter. Right? That's what the folks are, this is what we're part of. And that was one of the things that Lisa and I would always have to try to relay down to the brand new airmen that would join our organization, was the fact that they had to understand that you were part of this organization and everything that you did mattered. Every transaction you put into the system mattered. Every person on the tail end that was receiving supplies or goods mattered. And guess what? None of that happened if it wasn't for finance people. Period, dot. From building the budget, going ahead and making the obligation, to making the payment. Man arrested outside the White House with gun and ammunition. Believe that's Secret Service? Who here is supporting Secret Service? Right? Thank you for what you folks do. FEMA awards $1 million for a community safe room in Forest. Okay, I didn't say FEMA gets a woo. All right? I said that's just reserved for the Coasties. Woo! Right? Hua? You want a hua for FEMA? All right, we can do that. Go back one. All right, next slide. FEMA. Right? This is what FEMA's providing. I think a couple years ago when Katrina hit, who was on the ground taking care of all the folks? Puerto Rico. Every time there's a hurricane, natural disaster, flood, who's on the ground? FEMA. Who's supporting FEMA? Finance. Nothing happens without money. I think we all understand that. That's the part, that's what you folks are all about. So you know what? When you talk about motivating the folks, that's what leaders need to do to their employees. Make sure they understand the impact that they're having on a daily basis. Notre Dame fans in here? Go Irish. Go Irish? So we got one. That's fine. There's a sign all the football players see before they go out to the field. Play like a champion today. Right? Do you guys have signs like that reminding your employees how they should work every day? Should work like a champion. And oh, by the way, this is something everybody gets credit for. The Senate panel approves DHS authorization. That's what the motivation is about, is making sure everybody understands. Now, there's good motivation. If you guys can go ahead and take that down for a minute, please. There's good motivation, and there's motivation that sometimes may not work necessarily in a workplace. How many of you have a 7-year-old running around the house? I have a 7-year-old grandson. You got a 7-year-old grandson? Man, people are like, oh man, John, that must be awesome having a 7-year-old running around the house, right? All that energy they exude, right? Yeah, it was fun the first day. It was fun the first day. But he's in flag football right now. And it's interesting because you go to practice and he's standing there with his flags and he's just kind of twirling back and forth. And I'm like, dude, it's not a freaking poodle skirt, right? It's flags. It's flags. But we go there to a game. We go there to a game, and there's a game going on before his, so I'm watching the game, and it happens to be the Panthers versus the Bears. And there's a coach for the Panthers, defensive coach. And he's trying to get his team all pumped up 7-year-olds, right? So he's like, all right, everybody on me. And he's lining them up. He's putting the pawns all these different places. And then someone makes a good play, and he goes, yeah. I'm like, dude, they're 7-year-olds. This is flag football. He's like, yeah. Right? I don't know if that's going to work in the financial office. Right? You should try it? Yeah. Yeah, I can picture Trey Watkins bringing, Holly and Melissa and Lauren and Ed Harvey in, right? Can you picture Trey doing that? Hey, come on, guys. We got to work that IUS. We got to get that standard general ledger. We got to get a clean audit. Yeah! That may not be effective. It may be fun. But that may not be effective. The key is to make sure everybody understands what they're part of and making sure they understand how they go ahead and how they impact the mission. That, to me, is probably one of the most important things about motivation. Ralph Emerson said, nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm. Hold on, let me put my glass on to make sure I got that right. Yep, he said that. So you got to be enthusiastic. The other thing that's important about leadership is you got to make sure you include everybody. I know there's a lot of talk these days about, diversity. But when I talk about inclusion, I'm not necessarily talking about, hey, someone's got a phone call. I'm not talking necessarily about someone's color, race, religion. When I talk about inclusion, I'm talking about someone's life's experiences. And you got to make sure you bring them in as well. The Center for Talent Innovation said there's 2 types of diversity. There's inherent, which is basically what you're born with. There's not much you can change about that. And there's acquired. Acquired comes from experience, working in different countries, being part of different organizations. People with 3 or more inherent, which we already said is you're kind of born with that. And acquired diversity traits are characterized as having 2-dimensional diversity. And the key about 2-dimensional diversity is they tend to out-innovate and outperform other organizations. But what do we do sometimes as leaders when we start doing the hiring process? We want someone that can be a plug-and-play, right? Someone that already has the experience, that already knows the organization, that can come right in. Sometimes you may want to call that a little bit of inbreeding, if you will. Because we're not allowing outside people to come in and compete for jobs within the organization. If you guys want to come on up and get seats, please do so. It won't bother me. Come on up, right? So you go ahead and you bring in people from different organizations. It can make your organization better. Sure, you want to talk about having folks come into a place that may already know the intricacies of an organization. But you know what? They may do something a little bit better over at Treasury, believe it or not. Department of Commerce may have something that can be utilized within DHS. So when you're thinking about bringing people onto your team, think outside the box and possibly bring folks in from other organizations. Is there anything wrong with that? Likewise, there ought to be opportunities for you folks to go to another organization to go ahead and see whether or not you can grow and expand and become a little more diverse when you go to other organizations as well. Amazon. The CEO said, we're a company of builders whose diverse backgrounds, ideas, and points of view are critical to helping us invent on behalf of all of our customers. Now, who do you think Amazon relies on for their diverse workforce? Those pesky millennials, right? What did Amazon just come out with? Just announced? Not too long ago? They bought Whole Foods. Yep, that's one. Yep. They're going to start making deliveries to your car. Can you imagine? Like, I'm sitting in a meeting, right? It's some 25-year-old's like, well, why don't we just put it in people's cars? No! Right? But think about it for a minute. You're at work all day long. You get a package delivered to the house. Where's the package? Stolen. Yeah. Stolen, right. You think Amazon's having to refund some people some money? Right? So someone goes, well, let's put it in a car. What? Right? That's just thinking differently. That's going, hey, you know what? The capability exists. And it probably happened because somebody locked themselves out of a car called, what's that service that goes ahead and unlocks your car? Okay, you guys, there's like 5 or different services out there, I guess. Right? But they can go ahead and they can use that same type of technology. That's what a diverse workforce brings. People that think differently. People that solve problems differently than the way you and I would solve problems. Knowledge is also one of those things that's important to have within the workforce. Now, when you talk about knowledge, a lot of times you'll think, hey, he's talking about, you need to understand what's going on with your job, which is true. But to me, with leadership, it's about knowing your people. Not just knowing if they're married, if they have kids, right, which is good, what their hobbies are, what their likes and dislikes are, but it's knowing what they're good at. Any of you hear of a thing called 4 lenses or 4 colors? Right? So there's 4 different colors. There's this orange, and orange are the risk takers, the ones that don't tend to think things out, the ones that just come up with they're the great idea fairies. They come up with an idea and say, hey, let's just run with this. And then you got these people that are yellow. And the people that are yellow, they're the ones that, they like the status quo. They're the ones that when they pull up to the parking lot in the morning and someone's taking their parking spot, their day is ruined. Because they can't handle change at all. Right? And then you got these folks that are green. Green are the analytical ones. Greens are the ones that, for whatever reason, can never seem to make a decision. They're constantly going, well, let's look at the data again, because it hasn't changed, but let's look at it again. And then you got these folks that are blue. Blue are the socialites. Blues are the ones that really never tend to get anything done because they're always going, hey, how was your weekend? How's everything going? Right? Hey, did you watch that show last night? How are the kids? They're the ones that if they're doing customer service and they're on the phone all day long with one customer. It was the best service in the world. Best service in the world. Problem is there's like 47 people in the queue waiting to get in. So when you talk about knowledge, it's about knowing who your people are. And going ahead and doing something like that, having an organization come in to do a team building activity to find out what someone's personality traits are, can go ahead and can help. The previous job I had, I used to have to make decisions. And Lisa will know, and Ed will know, and a lot of other people will know, I'm the good idea fairy. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, hey guys, I got this great idea. Let's go do with that. Let's go do it. And then people would be like, well, John, I don't know if that's a good idea. Right? So the yellows would get real nervous and the greens would pull out all these analytical stuff. But I always needed to make sure that whoever was my right-hand person, whoever was the person that was working with me day in and day out, was my polar opposite. Because I would have made a lot of bad decisions, and I still didn't make a lot of good ones, but I would have made a lot more bad ones if I didn't have somebody there grounded. But a lot of times, what do? If we're in a meetings and all of a sudden someone's always asking questions, or they're always challenging what the leader says, what ends up happening? All of a sudden, that person's flagged as someone that's not a team player. It's okay. They're going ahead and they're just providing a different perspective. Right? And that's what you want. You want people with a different perspective. Here's something I would recommend. How many of you check your horoscopes? Right? How many of you, when you were dating, right, you would go out and find out who's the perfect match? Right? I mean, eHarmony's made millions off of this. Right? Farmers Only or farmers.com, whatever it is. Right? Pick a dating service. They figured out how to go ahead and how to try to match people based on 250 whatever you want to call those things. This may sound silly, But you may find out something about somebody just by finding out, hey, what's your astrological sign? Me? I'm a Taurus. Yeah. You and I, buddy, we're both strong. We're predictable. We're protective. She said stubborn. Yeah, you're right. You must know one. We're warm. Aw. We're caring. Aw. Loving. Can always count on them. Got any cancers in here? You're a Cancer? How you doing? Right? We're supposed to be a match. Right? You can delete that off the be all right. So I bring that up because there's been a couple times in my career where there was just somebody at work I just could not get along with. Right? I just could not. It didn't matter, and sometimes they worked for me, sometimes I worked for them. It didn't matter. There was always conflict. Always conflict. And then all of a sudden we had a birthday celebration. Hey, everybody that was born in May. And I looked at the person and I go, you know what? I was born to not like you. Right? Now, we still had to work together and still get along. But once you understand that they have those traits, then you can go, okay, I get it. And because you understand what their personality is like. Now, I've had 2 Capricorns work for me. The absolute best airman I ever had in my career, Capricorn. The absolute worst, a Capricorn. The worst one worked for me first. So I warned the second one, oh, wait a minute, your birthday's on this day? So let me tell you about the last one that had a birthday on that day. That worked for me. So maybe that changed some things, right? I bring that up solely to go ahead and say, hey, you know what? All that is just a potential indicator, right? Don't go ahead and write somebody off just because of when they were born. They can't help when they were born. But if you know something about them, and you can understand how they think, how they tick, what matters, what doesn't matter, what motivates them, what doesn't motivate them, then that can go ahead and that can help you in the leadership role in going ahead and taking care of your folks. The other thing about knowledge, it's never ending. You should always try to spend a little bit of time to read some books. It's amazing what you can learn from reading books. Now, it's difficult, I get it. I mean, we just signed up, or we're getting ready to sign up for Xfinity. We're trying to figure out, do we go with the 240 channels or the 260 channels, right? I'm a sports guy. I love baseball. There's baseball on every night. There's television stations dedicated to baseball. If you're a Capitals fan, they're in the playoffs right now. If you're, a Penguins fan, they're also in the playoffs, so we'll see how that goes, right? And then you got the NFL Network. And you got Survivor on Wednesday, right? You got American Idol on Sunday. Not that I watch American Idol. You can delete that, all right? Right? So you got all these shows. So it's difficult to find the time because there's so many different distractions. But if you have the time to go ahead and read a couple books, Mr. Aguilera talked about Start With Why a little bit yesterday. Now, I read this book a couple years ago. It's a great concept that Simon Sinek has. And actually, you can go out to some TED Talks and listen to what Simon talks about, right? So he's got this gigantic bullseye. In the middle of the bullseye is the why. And the why is really what people need to be focusing on. But what ends up happening is a lot of times we focus on the what. So in the middle circle, you got a why. Then the next circle outside, you got a how. Then in the outside circle, you got a what. In order to understand and appreciate your job, you really need to know why you're doing the job. And I think that's what Simon Sinek tries to get to in this particular case. People will come up to ask you and you'll go, so what do you do? Just tell me what you do.
What do I do?
Yeah, what do you do?
I'm an advisor on trade and travel policy.
Okay, she's an advisor in trade and travel policy. What do we normally ask people? Hey, what do you do? We don't normally follow it up with, well, why do you do it? Right? That's something you can kind of figure out from this book as to you need to figure out your why. It helps you understand why you come to work every day. And that goes back to the motivation piece. Simon goes ahead and talks about when successful companies, they become successful not because they're selling what, they're selling the why. That's the difference between Apple and Dell. And he goes ahead and he talks about that. Apple sells an idea, right? We're going to challenge the status quo. Challenges the status quo. So they sell the idea. So that's a book you can go ahead and you can check out. Not everyone gets a trophy. Some of you have read that. It's about those millennials. I say those millennials. Bruce Tolgan one time came to a place where I was stationed at years ago, and he gave a couple presentations that talked about the millennials and how they think. And he's written a couple books. This one, It's Okay to Be the Boss, is another one. But I just want to share a couple things in here that talks about millennials. Fact or myth? Millennials are disloyal and unwilling to make real commitments to their employers. False. People are going to say false because if they're like, well, that's true, then they'd be like, well, that's not good, right? The reality is millennials can be very loyal, but they don't exhibit the kind of loyalty you find in the kingdom. Blind loyalty to hierarchy, tight observances to rites of passage, patience for recognition and rewards. That's not what you're going to get out of millennials. You need to think about that as you're bringing on the next generation. Fact or fiction? They don't know very much and have a short attention spans. Okay, I think I have a millennial right here. He's not sure how we should answer that. Have you already counted the ceiling tiles? So you got a short attention span, right? They may not have the same shared knowledge base that people with a certain level of education use to take for granted, but they walk in the door with more knowledge in their heads and more information available at their fingertips than anyone has ever had before. They think, learn, and communicate in sync with today's information environment, right? Something else about millennials. The message of not everyone gets a trophy is simple. If you want high performance out of this generation, you better commit to high maintenance management. He goes, yeah. You need to guide, direct, and support them every step of the way. In return, you're going to get the highest performance workforce in history. Right? So it's understanding the millennials. The reason why that matters, 2025, 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials. So they're coming. Well, they're not only coming, they're here. They're in our workforce right now. Right? It's knowing your people, knowing who you're bringing on board, knowing how they think matters. And going ahead and taking the time to read something, short book by Bruce Tolgan or any other person that talks about this new up-and-coming workforce, that matters. So that way you can understand how to better communicate with them. I put the clicker in my pocket. There we go. Any Green Bay Packer fans? There we go. There we go. Vince Lombardi was such a good coach, he was actually able to turn the Redskins around. Oh, seriously, he became a Redskins coach for 1 year until cancer got a hold of him. Right? Vince Lombardi said, leaders are made, they are not born. They are made by hard effort, which is the price which all of us must pay to achieve any goal that is worthwhile. He also said, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we will catch excellence. Now, Vince Lombardi, if you read this book that's up there, it will talk about his history, what he did as a coach, all the motivation he had, the fact that he was one of the winningest coaches of all time, right? An icon, they named a trophy after him. But when you read books on leadership, sometimes you also need to pay attention to some of the underlying messages or some of the things that may not be completely obvious. Vince Lombardi didn't spend a lot of time with his family. His family suffered from that. He was so dedicated to his job that he wasn't home taking care of his kids like a father should, or like a parent should, because he was so engulfed in the job. There's a lot more talk these days than there was probably 10, 15 years ago about life-work balance, right? So as much as we want to talk about leadership and getting the mission done and taking care of everything, you got to make sure that you're spending time to go ahead and take care of the things that matters, that you got the right life-work balance. And if you're a supervisor, it's your responsibility to make sure your people are having that right life-work balance as well. There was a presentation I was at a couple months ago. Senior leader in an organization. He gets up and he starts talking about his daughter. All right? Now, I have a 7-year-old grandson living at home. I also have a 26-year-old daughter who just graduated from dental hygienist school up at the University of Maine. So I'm sitting in this presentation, and this senior leader talks about, his daughter's getting ready to go off and get married. And he's sitting back and he's thinking about all the things, all the memories he had when his baby was, just growing up. And he tells one story about, he remembers this event and how his daughter looked so beautiful and she was so cute. And then he remembered this other event and tells that story. And then he just pauses and he looks out and he goes, "That's all I remembered." Because he was so engulfed, so engrossed in the job that he wasn't home enough. Right? How easy is it to get disconnected from the workplace right now? It's not. A lot of you probably have, agreements where you can work from home, do that telework thing. So you got the laptop at home, you have the phone, you got the email hooked to the phone, you're checking everything, right? Even when you're sitting in traffic, you're checking your phone. Don't tell me you're not. Right? You have to be able to disconnect as well. And make sure you get that right life-work balance. And if you're finding out that your folks are working 50, 60 hours a week and they're sending emails at Saturday at 8 o'clock at night or Sunday at 4 o'clock in the morning, you need to ask, why are you doing this? And if you're that addicted to work, right? If you're that addicted to work, at least set up a script in your emails so the emails don't go out at 4 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. At least set it up so that way they all come in at 7:30. Then your office will be like, man, Bob sends a lot of emails at 7:30 in the morning. I don't know. He must drink a lot of coffee or something. Let me get this out here. All right. 50 Shades of Grey. I didn't read this book. Nor did I see the movie, but I'm sure there's a leadership lesson in there somewhere. Right? Interpersonal skills. Now, Stacy, was that you that said woo when you saw that? That wasn't you? All right. Right? I'm sure there's interpersonal skill lessons in there somewhere. Left, right limits, what you shouldn't do in a work environment. I'm sure that's in there somewhere. The reason I put that up there is simply, hey, sometimes you just got to spend some time to reading whatever you enjoy. Me? Tasting whiskey. Did you guys know that how does that work? All bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon? Yeah? Who's out here saying yes, yes, really loud? Who is that? That was you? What's your go-to? Single malt? Okay, all right, not bad.